My beloved child, there is a reason your soulmate has been looking at you differently lately, even if they have not said a single word. Something has shifted inside them, and it did not happen because you suddenly became someone new. It happened because they finally began to understand who you were all along. The person they thought they knew was only the surface. They saw your silence and assumed you had nothing to say. They saw you walk away and assumed you stopped caring. They saw you remain strong when everything inside you was asking for comfort, and they mistook that strength for indifference. But now, something has clicked in their mind, and the realization has become impossible for them to ignore. They have started replaying moments with you that they once considered ordinary, and those moments suddenly look completely different. A small gesture. A quiet sacrifice. A message you never sent. A moment when you could have demanded an explanation but chose peace instead. A time when you were hurt but still wished them well. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that the version of you they judged was never the complete story. And that realization is emotional because it forces them to confront a question they never expected to ask themselves: how could I have misunderstood someone who cared this deeply? Stay with this story, because the answer becomes more powerful with every moment. What your soulmate is discovering is not simply that you were different from what they expected. They are discovering that you were far more genuine than they were prepared to recognize. There is another layer to this realization that makes their emotions even harder to contain. Your soulmate is remembering how many times you could have exposed your feelings, yet you protected them instead. You could have told them how deeply their actions affected you, but you stayed quiet because you did not want your pain to become a burden. You could have chased after them when they pulled away, but something inside you told you that real connection should never have to be forced. You could have tried to prove your worth, but deep down you knew that the right person would eventually see it without being convinced. And now your soulmate is looking back at those moments with completely different eyes. What once looked like distance now looks like restraint. What once looked like weakness now looks like emotional strength. What once looked like you losing interest now looks like you respecting yourself while still carrying feelings for them. That is why the tears matter in this story. They are not simply tears of sadness. They come from the collision between what they believed and what they are finally beginning to understand. Imagine realizing that someone you once thought was complicated was actually protecting their heart. Imagine realizing that the person you thought had moved on was silently hoping you would understand them. Imagine realizing that the person you underestimated may have been the one person who understood you better than you understood yourself. That is the realization your soulmate is struggling to process. And there is one particular memory they keep returning to, because that memory contains a detail they completely overlooked. Once they understand what that detail meant, their entire perception of you begins to change. But here is where the story takes a deeper turn, because your soulmate is not only discovering something about you. They are discovering something about themselves through you. They are beginning to recognize that their feelings did not disappear when they tried to ignore them. They did not vanish when distance appeared. They did not disappear when life became complicated. Instead, those feelings remained quietly underneath everything else. And now every memory is bringing them back to the same realization: you were never simply someone they met and forgot. You became a reference point in their emotional world. Certain songs remind them of you. Certain places trigger memories. Certain conversations make them remember something you once said. Even ordinary moments can suddenly carry your presence. They may have convinced themselves that time would make everything easier, but time only gave them more perspective. The strange part is that they are not crying because they suddenly discovered some perfect version of you. They are emotional because they are finally seeing the real person behind the image they created in their mind. They are realizing that you had fears, hopes, doubts, boundaries, and a heart that could be hurt just as easily as theirs. And perhaps the most painful realization is this: while they were trying to figure out whether you truly cared, you were quietly wondering whether they would ever see your heart clearly. That misunderstanding created distance. But now, something inside your soulmate is changing. They are no longer looking at the past simply to remember what happened. They are looking at it to understand what they missed. And what they missed may be the very thing that explains why their heart still reacts whenever your name appears in their thoughts. And now, listen carefully, because this is where the most unexpected realization begins to emerge. Your soulmate is starting to understand that you were never pretending to be strong. You were strong because you had learned how to carry emotions without allowing them to control you. You were never pretending not to care. You were learning how to care without losing yourself. You were never trying to make them chase you. You were simply refusing to beg someone to recognize your value. In reality, you were someone who loved with depth but wanted honesty in return. You were someone who could forgive, but you also learned from every experience. You were someone who could miss a person deeply and still choose dignity. And that is the part your soulmate never fully understood. They thought your silence meant the story was over. Now they are beginning to wonder whether your silence was actually the loudest message of all. It said, "I care about you, but I cannot abandon myself to prove it." That realization is powerful enough to shake the image they carried of you. Because suddenly, you are not the person they thought they lost. You are the person they may never have truly understood in the first place. And when that truth finally settles into their heart, the tears become impossible to hold back. They are realizing that behind the person they once tried to figure out was someone far more rare, someone who could love deeply without pretending, hurt quietly without seeking revenge, and walk away without destroying the love that remained. And the next realization is even more personal, because it forces your soulmate to confront the one thing they have been avoiding for far too long. The truth about what you actually meant to them. Something inside your soulmate has been quietly breaking open, because they are finally seeing the difference between the person they imagined you to be and the person you actually were. For so long, they may have believed they understood your behavior. They thought they knew why you became quiet, why you sometimes pulled back, why you stopped explaining yourself, and why you refused to keep repeating the same feelings. But now they are questioning every assumption they made about you. The more they think about it, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. You were not playing games. You were not trying to make them jealous. You were not pretending to be unaffected. You were protecting something precious inside yourself. And suddenly, memories they once dismissed are returning with a completely different meaning. They remember the way you listened when they spoke. They remember how quickly you noticed when something was wrong, even when they insisted everything was fine. They remember moments when you gave them understanding without asking for anything in return. They remember how you could sense their emotions before they explained them. And now they are asking themselves why they failed to recognize what was right in front of them. That question keeps getting heavier because your soulmate is beginning to understand that you were giving them pieces of your heart in ways they did not know how to recognize. You did not always express love through dramatic words. Sometimes your love was hidden inside patience. Sometimes it was hidden inside silence. Sometimes it was hidden inside the simple decision to stay kind when you had every reason to become cold. And that is why their emotions are becoming so intense now. They are not merely remembering you. They are finally understanding you. There is a particular realization that may be hitting your soulmate harder than everything else. You never needed them to be perfect. You needed them to be honest. That difference matters more than they ever realized. You were not searching for some flawless connection where nothing ever went wrong. You were looking for something real enough to survive difficult conversations, misunderstandings, distance, and uncomfortable truths. You could have accepted imperfections. What became difficult was feeling as though your sincerity was being questioned while you were giving everything you could. Your soulmate is beginning to see that now. They are realizing that perhaps they spent too much time wondering whether you were serious and not enough time asking what you were silently carrying. Perhaps they were searching for hidden motives when there were none. Perhaps they were expecting you to prove something that you had already shown through your actions. And this is where their heart begins to soften. They start thinking about the possibility that you were never asking them to chase you. You were asking them to understand you. You were never demanding that they read your mind. You simply hoped they would notice the things you could not always say. And when they finally understand that, the emotional weight becomes almost impossible to ignore. They realize that while they were trying to decode your behavior, you may have been trying to make sense of theirs. Two people could have been feeling deeply while both were waiting for the other person to reveal the truth first. That possibility changes everything. Because now your soulmate is no longer looking at your past through the lens of suspicion. They are looking at it through the lens of regret, tenderness, and a realization that feels almost impossible to put into words. The most surprising part is that your soulmate is beginning to recognize a quality in you they may have underestimated from the beginning. You have emotional depth. You notice what others overlook. You remember details that other people forget. You feel things intensely, but you do not always announce what you feel. You can love someone and still understand that love does not mean losing your identity. You can miss someone and still refuse to chase them endlessly. You can forgive someone without pretending that nothing happened. And that combination is what your soulmate is finally beginning to understand. You were never as simple as they assumed. There were entire emotional conversations happening inside you that they never heard. There were moments when you wanted to reach out but stopped because you did not want to disturb their peace. There were moments when you wanted an answer but decided that forcing one would only make things worse. There were moments when you desperately wanted reassurance but chose to give yourself reassurance instead. Your soulmate may now be realizing that what looked like distance was sometimes your way of giving both of you space to understand what was real. And this realization can make a person emotional because it changes the meaning of the entire connection. Suddenly, the silence does not feel empty anymore. It feels full of everything that was never said. Suddenly, the distance does not look like proof that the feelings disappeared. It looks like a chapter where both people were trying to understand themselves. And somewhere in that realization, your soulmate may finally be admitting something they once refused to admit. Your presence affected them much more deeply than they ever allowed themselves to show. But the revelation does not end there, because your soulmate is now beginning to understand who you are beneath everything they once assumed. You are not the person who needed constant attention. You are not the person who needed endless validation. You are not the person who needed to be convinced that you had value. In reality, you are someone who wanted to be chosen consciously, honestly, and wholeheartedly. You wanted a connection where both people could stand beside each other without masks, without guessing games, and without constantly wondering where they stood. And perhaps that is why your soulmate is emotional now. They are realizing that the person they once thought they could understand in a few conversations actually carried a heart with layers they never fully explored. They are realizing that your quiet moments contained meaning. Your boundaries contained meaning. Your patience contained meaning. Even your decision to stop explaining yourself contained meaning. And once they begin putting those pieces together, one thought becomes impossible to escape: what if I had understood this sooner? That question can open an entire flood of memories. It can make them look at the connection differently. It can make them wonder what might have happened if they had listened more carefully, spoken more honestly, and trusted what they felt instead of allowing assumptions to speak louder. And now, just when they think they have finally understood the truth about you, another layer begins to reveal itself, because your soulmate is discovering that the person they thought they had lost may never have actually disappeared. You may have simply stopped standing in the same place, waiting to be understood. And that realization is about to force them to confront what their heart has been trying to tell them all along. Now something even deeper is beginning to happen inside your soulmate, because the more they revisit the past, the more they realize that they were not seeing the whole of you. They were seeing fragments. They saw your reactions but not the reasons behind them. They saw your silence but not the emotions underneath it. They saw you becoming more independent and assumed you no longer needed anyone, when in reality, you had simply learned not to abandon yourself while waiting for someone else to understand your heart. And this realization is hitting them with unexpected force. They are remembering conversations where you said very little, yet somehow your presence said everything. They are remembering the moments when you looked at them as if you already knew what they were struggling to say. They are remembering the comfort they felt around you, even when neither of you knew how to describe it. And suddenly, they understand why certain memories never truly faded. They were not meaningless moments. They were emotional imprints. Your soulmate may have tried to move forward, stay distracted, or convince themselves that the connection was simply a chapter that had ended, but something always brought their thoughts back to you. Now they are beginning to understand why. It was never only about missing your presence. It was about missing the version of themselves that appeared whenever they were around you. With you, they could be vulnerable without explaining every detail. They could laugh without pretending. They could sit in silence without feeling uncomfortable. And that is a rare kind of connection. It is not built through perfect circumstances. It is built through recognition. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that you recognized parts of them they had hidden from almost everyone else. And perhaps the most emotional part is realizing that they may have recognized you too late. There is a memory your soulmate keeps returning to, and this time they are noticing something they completely overlooked before. It may have been a simple moment that seemed insignificant at the time, a look, a pause, a conversation that ended too quickly, or a moment when you seemed ready to say something but changed your mind. Back then, they moved past it. Now, they are wondering what you were actually trying to communicate. They are asking themselves what you were feeling in that exact moment. They are wondering whether you were waiting for them to notice something without having to say it directly. And that question is becoming emotionally powerful because they are beginning to understand how many opportunities for genuine connection may have existed between you. Not because everything was perfect, but because there were moments when the truth was sitting right there between you. Your soulmate is starting to see that you were not hiding because you had nothing to feel. You were hiding because what you felt was too important to place into careless words. That distinction changes the entire story. Suddenly, your quietness becomes meaningful. Your restraint becomes meaningful. Even the moments when you seem distant begin to carry a different emotional weight. And somewhere inside your soulmate, a thought begins forming that they may not be ready to say aloud. Maybe they were waiting for me to understand without making them prove it. That thought can bring tears because it forces them to confront their own part in the misunderstanding. They begin seeing how easily assumptions can become walls between two people who actually care. And the more they understand, the more they realize that the person they once considered difficult to read was actually showing them the truth in a language they were not mature enough to understand at the time. Then comes the realization that changes the emotional direction of everything. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that you did not become stronger because you stopped feeling. You became stronger because you learned how to feel without allowing every emotion to decide your next move. That is something they may now deeply admire about you. They are realizing that your heart was never empty. It was disciplined. You could miss them without contacting them every time the feeling became intense. You could care about them without demanding that they return the same energy immediately. You could remember them without allowing the memory to control your entire life. And perhaps that is exactly what made your presence so difficult to forget. You were never desperately trying to hold on to the connection. You allowed reality to reveal what was genuine. Your soulmate is beginning to see that now. They are realizing that your love, or the feelings you carried, were not based on possession. They were based on sincerity. And that discovery can completely change how someone remembers a person. Instead of thinking, "Why did they leave?" they begin asking, "What made them feel they had to step back?" Instead of thinking, "Why didn't they fight harder?" they begin asking, "How much had they already fought internally before I ever noticed?" Those questions are powerful because they shift the focus away from blame and toward understanding. Your soulmate may be realizing that you were carrying your own emotional battles while still trying to treat them with kindness. They may finally understand that the version of you they saw was only the visible layer. Beneath it was someone deeply thoughtful, deeply observant, and far more emotionally invested than they ever imagined. And here is the part your soulmate may find hardest to accept: you were never waiting for someone to rescue you. You were waiting for someone who could meet you as an equal. Someone who could communicate instead of reacting. Someone who could recognize your heart without forcing you to constantly prove it. And now your soulmate is realizing that this may have been the real lesson behind everything that happened between you. The connection was not simply about whether two people could stay together without challenges. It was about whether two people could become honest enough to see each other beyond appearances. Your soulmate is beginning to see you beyond the version they created in their mind. They are seeing the person who kept going when things felt uncertain. The person who learned from disappointment without becoming bitter. The person who could still care without losing self-respect. The person who could walk through emotional confusion and come out with greater clarity. And that is why their tears carry so much meaning in this story. They are not only grieving what they misunderstood. They are awakening to what they failed to appreciate while it was directly in front of them. They are finally seeing that you were not who you appeared to be. You were deeper. You were more thoughtful. You were more resilient. You were more sincere. And perhaps most importantly, you were someone who wanted to be loved for who you truly were, not for an image, not for a fantasy, and not for the version of you that was easiest to understand. But there is still one truth your soulmate has not fully faced, and when that truth finally reaches the surface, it may explain why your memory has remained so powerful in their heart.